in Baltimore and fly, maybe some cookouts, some crabs, some beer, and certainly the Orioles going north of the border to, Canada, where the times there are just as tough as they are around here. We're going to be talking lots of baseball here all week, and we're going to be doing that right now with one of our defending champions around here and returning visitors. He is a writer at Big League Stew, and you can follow him there as well as that on Twitter at Chris_Cwick. That's CWIK, and he hails from the windy city of Chicago, Illinois, where all they do is have parades and talk about first place. Chris, all hell's broken loose out there. I mean, all the problems we have here, we weren't supposed to win 120 games this year. The Cubs were, right?
Yeah, you're right. And their struggles early on, that's really been one of the bigger stories, I would say, one of the bigger surprises. But yeah, out there by you, I mean, for years now, I think Baltimore has really been surprising some people. So not the case so far this year, but they've done it in the past, and we'll see if they can kind of get back on track and make people confused.
A unique year by any standard, right? I mean, whether it's Houston or Minnesota, Arizona, Colorado, Milwaukee, plenty of surprise teams out there. That's good for baseball, but what also I think is ultimately good for baseball is bad for Baltimore, which is Yankees and Red Sox starting to churn, starting to burn a little bit. Certainly the Yankees are going to have some money. As an Oriole fan, the big picture of this is the owner's nuts. He's 86. He's never going to be sane. He's probably never going to die. But I know one thing. The contract of Manny Machado, Buck Showalter, Dan Duquette, all of these situations, Adam Jones, in the next 15 months, this era as we know it, the Buck era, the playoff era, is going to go either to him to the front office, him back into the dugout and someone else coming to the front office. But certainly Machado sits in the middle of all of this. And, it's become a little bit of a national debate here in the coming weeks as to whether the Orioles should be buyers, should be sellers, and what they should be buying and selling. Because if you're just going to let Machado walk out of here in 16 months, even though he's hitting 220, now's as good a time as any to be thinking about this because, Chris, I don't think they can win the World Series this year.
Yeah, I would probably agree with you. It's tough to do that just based on how they've exceeded expectations in the past. But I still look at that rotation just being a major problem. As you said, Machado, that one's puzzling. It's tough to look at that average and figure out how that's happening because a lot of other things are in line for him. Power has been there, not to the same extent, but it's been there.
Certainly defense.
Fine.
Yeah, I mean, he's incredible defensively, but I don't think they were mentally prepared for him to be hitting 220 right now. Like, this was never on the table. We're not in contention, and Manny stinks, and half the team's hurt. Between Davis and Hardy and Britton and O'Day, It's been an ugly period of time here to be an Orioles fan, and the question should be, well, what's next? Because we're not eating off 2014 around here anymore.
Right, and I think you make an interesting point with Machado being so close to free agency. Does it make sense for them to go for it, even though right now they're certainly not at the top of the wild card race, but they're, I guess, close enough where you could maybe justify it, but it also signals that, well, we don't really think Manny's coming back, so we're just going to go all in now. I don't get a sense that they're willing to do that yet, and I don't necessarily know if that's the best option, but you're certainly at a point where you got to start considering that because we're only weeks away from the deadline, and they do have some desirable pieces that they can either trade, or try and build a package to bring back something decent.
Yeah, long term for me, if you're really trying to win a championship at some point, maybe not this year, and I'm not saying they did or didn't. I mean, they gave Trumbo the money. They paid Chris Davis far too much money. They were relying on Britton and O'Day and guys under contract, and certainly relying on Manny Machado to produce at a higher level. But the pitching here was all we talked about all season, Chris. It's when the season began, we knew Tillman would be a little bit shaky. We knew sort of what Wade Miley was going to be. And, we thought we knew what Kevin Gausman was going to be. The whole thing has been, really an utter disaster. I mean, they are the worst staff in Major League Baseball. They were on the cusp of setting a record that has stood for almost 100 years. All of these things that have happened to them in the last 6 weeks, these could have been predicted. I don't know that even in your worst nightmare you would have predicted the pitching to be, 8 and 7 and 6 ERA bad as it is at the bottom of the rotation right now, especially with guys like Gausman being allegedly healthy at this point. But there's no sign that that's going to get any better at all. And if they are going to try to stick around in the race and they're not going to deal out, they're certainly not going to deal in. They don't have anything in their organization to deal away to get anything of present-day value for anything that would be thought of as a run to the second wild card and playing 520 baseball this year.
Well, the thing with the rotation that at least stands out to me, well, as you said, is Gausman's struggles. I really thought that last year, especially at the end of the season, he looked like he was taking that next step forward. And I thought while the rest of the rotation might be a giant problem, he would at least be a stabilizing force at the top. That whole thing has been puzzling, and it's been offset a little bit by Dylan Bundy, being a little better than I had anticipated at least, and being healthy for the amount of time he's been able to remain in the rotation. But you're right, but beyond that, it's a big problem. I don't know how you fix Gausman. I don't know that Bundy holds up over the entire season. You can't trust anyone else. It's just really, like you said, it's been an issue the whole time. They knew it. I guess I don't know what you do at this point because we haven't even heard them, being talked about as suitors for a guy like Jose Quintana or a Sonny Gray. And part of that, like you said, is they lack the top-end prospects to get that deal done. It's a really difficult situation for them right now.
We are on the line with Chris Swick. He is Big League Stew. Tell me what Big League Stew's all about, Chris.
The best way I guess I could describe it is we're a baseball blog, and so we will cover a lot of the newsy stuff that you'd expect. But what I like to say is we like to have a little more fun than other blogs. So we might pick up some things that are maybe a little more entertainment-based, but still within the focus of baseball. And so I think you can go there and get serious analysis, but you can also go there and laugh a little bit. And so that's kind of, I think, what we pride ourselves on.
Yeah, you can laugh or you can cry. And certainly the Osuna story this weekend was fascinating. And the Orioles going to Toronto now, and a guy that is counted on to be their closer, discussing having some anxiety issues and sort of off-the-field issues. I guess there's a million things in any company and any, real place that real people work that are HR-related or mental health. I mean, we hear so much about that in our country and in our culture, but this was sort of a new thing for baseball, right? In the era of macho, this was a story that I think everyone has had some sort of exposure to in recent times, yeah?
I think so, too, and it's not necessarily the first time we've seen this in baseball. I know we saw it with Zach Greinke when he was coming up with the Royals. We saw it with Joey Votto, I think, after his father passed away. So this does happen, and we've seen players obviously overcome those issues and become elite guys. I mean, I think in my mind, it makes everything Osuna has done so much more impressive. I mean, he might be having the best season of his career, and it's tough to look at the numbers and hear what he's saying and think, wow, I can't believe this guy has been so impacted by anxiety throughout the whole season, and he's still being able to perform like this. And not only that, but the fact that he's in the most pressure-packed situation of all, as the closer, holding on to these one-run leads in the ninth. It's been impressive. Obviously, my first concern would be that he get healthy and feel good about himself and his performance. So it's tough to kind of strip that out, too, because you notice just how great he's been on the field as well. But it's something I think I'm glad he talked about it. It's something I think is worth talking about. And so I guess that would be kind of my main takeaway there. I'm glad that it's in the conversation. And for the most part, I haven't seen any negative takes on it.
Chris, we got the Yankees and the Red Sox in the new era here, and we're all familiar with the last 15 years before the Orioles got decent a few years ago and what that looked like for ESPN Sunday Night Baseball and the conversation around baseball. But certainly the Yankees this year, and I talked about them in the offseason as being, maybe closer to competing than people even realized. They've kind of come back to earth. They have their pitching problems, but I'd like to have the problems they have right now heading into the trading deadline, where there is no expectation or pressure on them to win the World Series, but they are in a position to go out and try to get a Sonny Gray, to try to go get a Quintana, to try to make some deals, and they have the prospects as well as the resources to do kind of sort of whatever they want to do over the next 2 years, including signing Machado or Harper, whomever, at the end of next year.
Yeah, and I think, I grew up seeing the Yankees dynasty, watching them win every single season, being in the playoffs. And so the kid in me fears that we're seeing the seeds of the same thing. And what's scarier, or I guess maybe it echoes the first time even, the core was mainly built through the organization. So the team has a lot of these young guys who are coming up, not making a lot of money, and are turning into superstars. Gary Sanchez, Aaron Judge, we've seen both of them come up. There's still a fair amount of guys in the minors who can be added to that core. I know Gleyber Torres just got hurt, but he's certainly someone to watch the next couple seasons. Clint Frazier. And so, obviously, what that does is it gives them these tremendous players at no cost, and we already know that money's not an issue for them. So, suddenly, like you said, we're talking about you can either use those prospects to get a guy like Gray, who is under control and not worth a lot, or you wait until the off season and you just spend the Yankees money that we're used to seeing. So I really think they are just in this tremendous spot right now because they have every possibility open to them. And not only that, but they're exceeding expectations right now. So there's not really that expectation, like you said, to win the World Series this year. Everything they're doing is just kind of bonus, and it's only going to get better from here. It certainly feels that way right now.
Well, and it feels to me more like the Red Sox opportunity this year because I think when the rubber meets the road for these two teams, the Red Sox have more talent. They had an unfortunate set of circumstances earlier in the year as well. Their pitching hasn't gone as well as they've spent money for it. But I think in the end, the Red Sox are the best team here and the best positioned team over the second half to win the division.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that they realize that there's a little more sense of urgency. We saw that in the offseason where they gave up a bunch of prospects to go out and pick up Chris Sale. They know that even though there's a lot of young guys in that offense, Mookie Betts and Jackie Briley Jr. and Andrew Benintendi, I guess the whole outfield really, and then Xander Bogaerts, they know that it's not the same type of window that the Yankees have, I think, and we've seen that reflected in the money they've been willing to spend. And it's worked, clearly. I mean, they have, I think, possibly the second best team in the American League. I mean, before the year, a lot of people were arguing they were the best team in the American League, and so it's hard for me to deviate that from that a ton. But I guess we've seen more of the holes there. Third base has been a major problem. In that rotation, there have been some problems. I think Boston can fix those. I guess we're more focusing on those issues because Boston was expected to be elite, whereas the Yankees were expected to be rebuilding. So while they do have some problems, I don't think we're focusing on those as much because it's like, oh, the Yankees are surprisingly great, whereas Boston is expectedly great, if that makes sense.
He is Chris Cwik. You can find him at Big League Stew and out on Twitter at Chris_Cwik. That's CWIK, writing about the world of Major League Baseball as the Orioles scuffle along here through the summer. There are happy places around the country, though, right? I mean, look at where Houston is right now, coasting in. There's not going to be a race down the street here in D.C. for the Washington Nationals. For those teams, it really is, and I think for all three of the teams out in the West in the National League, a chance to position themselves here before the trading deadline, see where their strengths and their weaknesses are. And clearly for the Nationals, and I think for a lot of these teams, the bullpen thing, if the Orioles could ever get a healthy version of O'Day, and certainly Britton and Brock and the guys they have there, much like the Yankees did last year in dealing away Chapman and dealing away the bullpen and dealing away Andrew Miller and all that stuff, that the Nationals are going to be at the front of the line for bullpen help, but they won't be the only team out there looking for it.
No, but they have to be the most obvious at this point. We've seen so many blown leads from them, and it's the same thing that we had talked about with the Orioles pitching. Everyone knew that this would be a problem for the Nationals throughout the whole offseason. And what's troubling is that stories have come out that their general manager, Mike Rizzo, has had deals on the table for certain relievers, and ownership has been against those deals or nixed those deals, possibly due to money, possibly due to other reasons. So I think it speaks of just a bigger issue within that organization, that they've identified there are issues. Some have tried to address those issues, and it hasn't happened. And you would have to think at this point, desperation has to set in, right? Because this organization has contended the last couple of seasons. They haven't advanced past the first round of the playoffs. The core is certainly there. They can certainly win a World Series right now. And Bryce Harper, with every game he plays, he inches closer to free agency, which would be a tremendous blow to that team. If everything just seems to be in line for them to really go for it this year or next year, they have to realize that, and they have to go out and try and get somebody like a David Robertson or anyone else who's available at the back end who could help them, because that is the one crippling weakness they have on an otherwise exceptionally strong team.
Well, and it's an ongoing issue. You know what I mean? Like, I sit here and cover the Ravens. The Ravens secondary has been an ongoing issue for 4 years. The running game's been an ongoing issue. And, for the Nationals, their real story is the bullpen. It always has been. It's why they're quickly garnering the same acceptance for playoff defeats like the Capitals down the street do for them is, they can't afford the kind of collapse that is sitting there for any of us to see, that bullpens are the way championships are won in October, and they don't have one right now, so I can't take them seriously as constructed, no matter how many games they win their division by, and it'll be plenty.
Well, I guess I would say this, and I'm not, I enjoy football, I like football, but I wouldn't consider myself an expert, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say it's probably more difficult to build a secondary in football, in my mind, whereas relievers, generally, you can get pretty good ones on the free agent market or on the scrap heap, and not necessarily have to pay the elite money. Now, look, sometimes you have to shell out $65 million for Mark Melancon, but you can find guys, and I guess if you look at just this year, a guy like Greg Holland was brought off the scrap heap. He winds up having this tremendous season. I think every year we see some teams are smart enough to identify these bounce-back guys, and they sign for only a few million, and they're able to get tremendous performances out of them. And really, we haven't really seen that with the Nats even. Matt Albers has kind of been a revelation for them, and I guess he fits, but he's not having that great of a season. This has been unexpected. So I guess it shows the point that you can find effective guys, but then I guess you wonder, why don't they go out and do that more often?
Or you can go get K-Rod to play on his 28th team and see how that goes for you, right?
Yeah, I guess, that kind of sums up the problems with the organization. Now, you have to take a shot on a guy like K-Rod and hope there's something left in the tank, and maybe there is. I don't know. The good thing about it is he's not going to cost a lot to the Nats to find out. So he might not be good, but
nothing will cost them a lot the next 3 months because they have games that they can afford to lose, right? They can sort of try out anybody they want, but at some point somebody needs to be effective.
Right, and I do think the bullpen really, we've seen it struggle the last couple playoff series for them. And I remember, was it Blake Trainen back? I don't even know that wild pitch. That wild pitch loss a couple years back, I still remember that, and I just think, in the postseason, that is something that is elevated to a different level. I know I'm a big stat guy, and I know that a lot of stat writing has been about the bullpen not being as important, and I push back a little against that. I understand that these guys don't pitch as much as starters, and maybe there's a value difference there, but you can't put anyone in those roles, and I think that definitely comes out more in the postseason, where if your starter is getting pulled after 6 innings or even 5 because they're facing elite competition, you need to trust 3 or 4 guys to really give you that performance. You can't just have a bullpen with an elite closer and maybe a decent setup guy. Those problems become so much larger when you're facing a great team in a pressure-packed situation. And so, that's definitely something the Nationals have to deal with, because right now, I maybe count 1 or 2 decent options. That's far off from 4 very good options.
Dude, I'm a guy that grew up with the Yankees being good every year and the Dodgers and the Phillies. They were just always those teams. In the modern era, to be sitting here on the edge of the All-Star game, and we're going to be down in Miami broadcasting 2 weeks from now. Luke and I will be there. But the Minnesotas, the Milwaukees, the Arizonas, the Colorados, the Houstons, when things are going well in those markets, that really is good for baseball in all of these places. And, I went to 30 ballparks in 30 days 2 summers ago, and, I saw a wide valley, and gaps between interest level in various places. And part of that's just like, if you have no chance to win, which Colorado hasn't for a long time, and Arizona didn't for a long time, and, certainly Houston was the dreg of all dregs, to have this sort of bounce back summer in a lot of these places, that's good stuff. That's good stuff in the Minnesotas and the Milwaukees where they don't win much.
I agree. You mentioned I was born in Chicago, but I went to school in Wisconsin, Milwaukee specifically, and so maybe I'm biased, but I was around that Brewers team when they had experienced that resurgence late in the 2000s, and the thing that struck me always and still does today about Miller Park is that the stadium is packed. I mean, those fans are exceptionally passionate, and that is, I think, the smallest market in baseball, or at least one of them. So I do think it speaks to the fans will support a great team, and I think you can probably say that about any of these clubs, really. And so Milwaukee, to me, has been really fun to watch just for that reason, that I was able to see them draw, I think, over 3 million fans in like 2009 and 2010. The stadium was packed every day. It felt like this tremendous playoff atmosphere. And so to kind of experience that again now, years later, at least for me, that brings back memories. And I'm sure with fans of all these other teams, they can relate to that and experience the same thing.
Hey, man, if it involves bratwurst and beer, I'm all for it. Bernie Brewer, I'm down with that. He is Chris Swick. You can find him out at Big League Stew, as well as at Chris_Swick. That's CWIK, covering the great game of baseball. Chris, always great to visit with you in the summertime. Talk a little Major League Baseball with you. We'll do it again sometime before the pennant race gets rolling, all right?
Sounds great to me.
You got it. Chris Swick from Big League Stew talking some baseball there with us. We got plenty of baseball on the mind, on the tongue, on the brain as we get up on the trading deadline and wondering what direction this franchise is going to take. I'm going to be the one asking the tough questions as usual. You can read the Peter Principles now available. Chapter 8 is coming out a little later on this week at WNST.net. I have been recapping the Peter Angelos first quarter century of ownership, and we're only up to about 1999 right now, but the first 7 chapters now available. Hope you guys are enjoying that and the recap and learning, reliving, or relearning the history of Peter Angelos' ownership of our baseball team, your baseball team. The Buy a Toyota audio vault is there 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. You can listen when you want, how you want, what you want, to when you want to. I think I gave it all. Yeah, all that good stuff. The morning newspaper also delivers to your email inbox at 7 a.m. That's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it is $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. You can always learn more at PlanetFitness.com. Last but never least, all the breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by our friends at Coons Ford of Security Boulevard, and Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday getting you ready for the red, white, and the blue and the crabs and the beer and the bonfires and the fireworks, all the good stuff that's going to be happening during the 4th of July. We'll get that going on Thursday from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. Last but never least, I am a very available individual out on the interweb. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.